The goal was to do informal meetings around the first hour, and then like around at 6, do an introduction and a Q&A.
Okay. All right, that sounds good.
Yep, I mean, it doesn't mean that we can't go. Yeah, we can certainly do
Well,
it.
thank you very much, Paul, for the.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and just begin the broadcast portion, but feel free to mingle. We have some food here. Charlie's here as our candidate, so feel free to grab him for a few minutes and ask some questions.
No, it's in my book.
But here, right here.
I'm being too curious.
Hi, Charlie, Kathy.
Nice to meet you, Kathy.
No, it's just sort of.
Nice. No, I had been meeting to drop by.
Get this. Let's do it. Drive up or drive.
Are you all
Yes,
over
exactly.
winter time too, or is it? Trails are open and Oh yeah, I was. I'm on the board of the Castle Store. No, but yeah, it was actually at Cooperative.
The email ring.
Yeah.
My email ring is not.
We're thinking about.
Because I do that.
That endowment is nice. The Historic Society is not doing too bad. They've got like 6 million now. They're what do you? I hate to miss that.
Or less than that, but we're good.
Oh,
So therefore,
I was on the ranchers. How many cattle you got around here? He's like, that's like me. He's like, hey, you open up a bank here. Yeah. He's like,
I won't even do this.
yeah, it was tough.
You know, things you.
How long ago?
3 years. Although the first time we were hunting was 2006. My wife and I, there's camp counselors in
Okay.
No, she's in Mobile, Alabama. She
no, it's all boys.
She went down with her sister to visit her cousin, so yeah, her actual brother.
Yeah.
So she's been there for a week and
Oh,
I'm not sure. She's just a candidate there that she doesn't really. Although she was interested in it.
Married in 2006.
that may well be.
Housing
workshop.
The house that we bought for sale in 2006. Shows how like real estate like
I don't know whether she is an ad or last year's an ad.
so yeah,
Because she didn't see her, right? And that's like more coverage
So
than
I've been to my family for years.
week and a half than we've gotten in, for anything.
So it was kind of 2020, but half of 2022, half of 2023.
Well, you know, it's kind of like, here's these teams.
It was a big commitment, although I was worried about trying to just take care of school and work at the same time.
And you can read the first paragraph.
Hey, man, your family.
You don't impress, it's still.
That's my wife. She's like, I haven't seen him in 30 years.
You'd be amazed. When you have 2 kids, you'd be amazed at the time. Just, you know, you play baseball and you have no donut under that, and then you take it off, and obviously. Although I'd say about halfway through that, I was.
I'm good. Did you graduate this past year?
I graduated, yeah, May 2020.
Okay, and what had your
I was
master's?
a Master of Public Administration from
So congratulations.
I worked at Algebra.
Oh, just.
We've been trying to get in there. I've been Yeah, so, I did send you an email.
today.
Yeah, I did. So, Yeah.
Which is pretty much, I'm just upstairs where it's.
But,
No, she's just,
you know, I love she and Cassie, but
yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much stuff.
there's so many
Right.
cool.
No, I get it. Because the thing is, that, hey, I just,
Oh, is that all you? Yeah.
right?
And government.
Yeah, I don't see, she's in this bar.
Plus all over the place and
You know,
And it's all in the
that doesn't make any sense to me, and that was, I thought
Right, but now it's upstairs.
Nothing is, this gives me of that idea since
Yeah, yeah.
I also feel like this is where
it's a really great.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But yeah, I think it's great.
plans for here and like this is, you know, this is kind of like.
Certainly seems to be confidential.
Hey, Mike.
They don't.
Hanging?
You know, it's like, we're not gonna know why you bother, stuff.
Hey,
Any
how's it
trouble?
going? I saw you were on the Golden Guide, what, when I was
Could you?
okay, was that from, camp?
This camp experience is kind of like how I fell in love with being. It's been years since I was like.
Probably on. I don't know.
It's probably kind of.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, I just,
That's all I can say, that they're never taking something that's it's coming down.
And last summer I. So it ends up there are. It's my half. Two of them. Southern California.
All right. So I think.
Authenticity and natural beauty.
Yeah, I drove through it twice.
I thought about actually,
Which is a lot of people. Summer
you know, you should try.
And.
How long have you had the evening guide?
I've been guiding license. I actually did it for 2 years now. So I was a canoe trip leader.
I was
Triple lead process. One that I.
he called us.
Oh, the fellows?
Really long friendships.
So does she have experience running?
Guiding trips. The distinction.
Okay.
So, and,
I don't know if they're
and then I'm moving to
Island
go in
Institute
and
now,
space,
they're
bigger, that's great, and then we got this.
You from Ellsbury or?
No, I just moved here recently. I started the job, mid-December.
No, they're great. This is-
I moved from Reachfield, Maine, so I still am from Maine.
So are you,
But yeah,
are you the guy for the whole boat?
Boy who's 5 and
And this other guy rents from you?
Yeah.
she was born in Bangor, so she'll be a true Mainer now. My
Alright.
son's, even
Did
though he
you
moved
get
here.
this partnership?
Well, they work, I mean, it kind of, it's like in this one, I mean, I needed a continue in one space that big. Bill kept calling.
Oh, I did that too. Yeah, I want my.
No, I'm just saying,
That's the other one.
trio. It's
Really?
just, yeah, this point now.
Yeah,
I feel like.
I opened it to.
Oh, no, I understand that.
Oh, yeah.
Year in.
But
First year.
you-
And then you graduate to year round.
Well, Suzanne's part of it still, but in a different way. They just kind of, because she's got so much.
Yeah.
You'll never do Mainer.
So I'm just like, whatever works.
And that's the, Suzanne, that was a new job lady, right? Oh, she was a ruler.
Yeah, Julia
It's,
left.
30
Oh,
minutes.
okay.
And I think she's up.
Sorry, no,
Yes,
Yeah, I just-
West, but it's, yeah, Central.
Suzanne's in a good spot.
Okay.
Also, well, very rural.
I know that you're relieved, I think it makes sense.
It's nice, I like it.
So much, there's a lot going on in Eastfield, but I can't imagine as much as elsewhere.
No, no, it takes,
Oh, those would be.
20 minutes
No,
to
they
go.
were like other
I noticed when I heard those possible walking through your
Anyway, so
neighborhood
that's
there.
Yeah, it's still there.
That way there's a couple people, but then people orient themselves in the close side. I don't blame them.
Yeah, no, that's how you gotta
So it's
orient
gonna be pretty much
It's weird being so
Yeah,
close
it's
to
gonna be
Walmart.
Get in the way.
So,
we each clearly.
yeah, a mile, crazy. So,
Same places or travel different?
We didn't want to
Walmart pickup.
and John and Bill.
yeah.
So, you know.
I was going to, I like Walmart.
In and out.
Any things you like in,
That was all my guys.
I like being on social media. I don't know much else is great. I really I just think it's nice that I can
how'd you get that?
It's right off the started there. So when we can but for revealing one
Still there, so you get
but we are real testament to the
it's so fluctuating anyway. Add this area. I want to deliver here.
So the meeting
Yeah, and then the IT position here.
She's about and
Still get the.
Yep, so very excited. She does. I'm concerned my oldest brother is feeling lost.
yeah, and that was nice for me. That was
I was surprised.
yeah.
It was the second drive.
I did, yeah. I got tired of the early morning. I was not really.
I guess it's like most of the times. Yeah, but not that.
Well, no,
Mr. Cooper.
when you open the door.
No, I was just reporting.
Yeah, the
I heard it's like on WGR.
Where's he from?
Some of my retirement clients, they really see my stuff. Here's my strange face.
Yeah, I'll listen to them.
Yeah, that's a good,
idea that maybe.
Oh, so you
She drives, so we have a car, well, I drive her car, or I drive always, so she drives mine, standard. I've been driving around together,
She's also today.
15-year-old car for 9 months. No, it's been so, but she was like, oh, tell me my car. Parking and everything. Yeah.
How's it going?
I'm not gonna be scared.
Hey, live in Cassie.
Thank you. It is very good.
I don't drive back.
Yes, yeah.
They play tennis in my
Concern.
Ah, this is a pleasure.
He's there.
Because he goes around.
Time.
I don't know. It does.
But he's very. He has a
So you leave on Sunday?
Yeah, I'm gonna go
Do what I have to She's already.
Oh, yeah.
He messes me with something, I'm like, what's going on in Vegas? And I didn't hear
But you have to file.
Let's see if Max joined Ellsworth Club over here.
So you play a place in the blue.
I'll do that this morning. I just,
I've been,
and all of a sudden I realized I'm just drove to I mean, it wasn't too far out of my way. I mean, probably 5 minutes longer than it takes.
but now it's like, I'm not crazy. Because that
I'm not driving, I'm not going to where I'm usually going, and I have to turn around and go to where I'm intending.
Mike was retired. Mike was the,
Yeah, you said that. Well, it's just-
ran for that Right Cancer Resource.
And, but it also provides me with
It's interesting, we were,
advice.
since
So,
we
that's when I ran.
moved there to
right in. Oh.
that's how it's the city. I think originally we might not have fit into some.
There's a place up there, Roberts, and then there's,
But the
Oh, yeah. I am.
Orange is a private individual that built his athletic facility, really. He has a, upstairs, there's some batting cages, so it's all like. Most,
Well,
that's right at the entrance. Yeah. And he's a great guy. Mark Baxter's his name. This
right, and.
a lot of their and kids from the
It's a girls' basketball team right now. Right, that's what it
right now it looks like
Apparently, we just they were here.
Ellsworth boys, the big ones.
It's been,
And I tried to think about that, sorry, I had my experience by some time.
You get
Once a month, I get,
you get
I just had a haircut yesterday, so I got those.
Check out some other around this place. I like, the first it kind of made sense because I went,
You're heading through Rockland, it's not you, this
I
comes
was going
in.
out to the, Bangor's got, and it's kind of okay, but like, I went out, it's not yet.
Or it wasn't just that.
Is that the stress, fine?
No.
It was actually something.
yep, exactly. And that's, there's a lot more stuff.
The big thing is this every year it's here around the first of the weekend.
What's gonna happen is just make the
I'm going home. My wife, she doesn't usually.
It's a fenced area.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
That's what we're trying to see shorts. But can you, it didn't make any sense until you get to read, actually, just like. Anyway, that's how you see what's happening. I'm trying to see. So you're which is basically.
Yeah, we do tear dogs off.
Is that how you got to meet with those lieutenants or?
Great. It's kind of like, if you were out, like, you hit biking while we were on that road, it's like, it's right in their
You wouldn't know. It's
No, it's hard.
One quarter to two quarters.
One court, it's the code, and it works. Honestly,
Is it right? And it's all around.
guys in the elders in the 90s, and it's kind of weird, like, membership kind of situation.
But it's been.
Like, I remember the last.
I know they tell you what you say before you ask. So I took it as a few times because they do. It's because we're really they have the Kansas City tennis kids there.
So I think there's a lot of potential.
This is the trouble corner.
It is the trouble.
Hi.
We met the day that you were.
We met and you commented or liked Facebook pictures today, and I thought I remember them, and here you are.
Here I am. This guy giving me face with an A.
You know Patrick?
Yeah, we have a mutual friend. Ryan and Julie have a
Ryan's a very good friend of mine. He's not playing.
None of them play. Well, not many of them are alive, right?
Yeah, he's really one of my best friends.
The ball never stops.
I knew Ryan 20 years ago when I
He is.
Didn't last long enough.
spend the market was going Charlie, everything. And I was in the area, I would get really on that. But it was fine, and then I found another.
40. It's like a, we call it tennis leg, except like a turn, back, like sort of a.
before.
Then that's
Now
a-
it's in this. And this one's our hand, it's
Painted silver.
What did you just say?
Ex-neighbor,
I know, and now I met my new neighbor.
I've seen.
And in the house.
I got to in the house. It's so fun. Well, my daughter came over with a little bag of treats and plastic water. And I was like, you're just there. But she invited us and we probably stayed at her house an hour. And got to she made some Chinese food.
Anything to do with the house that he had.
Only on Monday, because if you were to July, he put the house on the market. So he was like, so we didn't really chatty.
What's happening this winter?
So now I saw it on Zillow and thought it was new. It's like, I can't imagine you have to take a house.
I know, but
Then I waited.
it's like brand new. It's like every when he bought that house, so he bought that house. I built my house out in Hawaii. I was thinking of moving it down. One time, so I was going to look at that, but I thought, oh well, I don't know. Do I want to live in a ranch? Do I want to, you know, I was not sure about it. And of course, a stage went like that. Now it worked out. I just buying
Okay, so there's Jennifer, the, athletic.
so go, you know, where Wally is.
Thank you so much.
See, that would have been before. You picture a red house on that.
I loved it because this is like hibernation.
Oh, yeah.
It's like.
It's not even
There's a lot of times I'll get so many different properties. It's hard to like, I know these are our.
So my daughter and I did on white tape with the pictures on it.
Yeah.
Right, one stop shop. Somebody that was moving to the.
Oh, okay.
So we also came and sent one this one, but then
Visitors just checked it. They don't tend to
I got
be.
that, but now I've got what I
And I like
Me too. I never said we weren't looking for a ranch, but I went, I lived up in the Lincoln area and then stayed in Williamsburg, and it was an 800 square foot ranch. And nobody makes it up to 100 houses anymore. But it was great. It was me and my then husband and 2 little boys. And it functioned well. I just never, and then I bought my own houses and they had
we've had too many
the location was fast. My daughter was the first lab, so she had a 5-minute walk to get here to
Great.
the transit. And I love it. I was telling somebody last night, sit down there, I never been to
We live in Mark.
and I said, we would do, I would do, Friday.
It's actually not even. Is this the real? It's amazing. It's kind of like this.
And also what happens is one of the things I
I recognize people and now I recognize you. Have you gotten a chance to check? So maybe others.
Oh, so this is not, he's not gonna speak.
But you're here, Powerhouse, so. How are you doing? Good to see you again. We have a couple of people who haven't done more than maybe say hello. But
And I think I'm gonna, just because there's a couple, there's 20 people online, I think I'll do my thing that way. This is the best one tonight.
great.
It's hard to compete with. I'm hugging you first because you're for president. I know. Well, that's why I have iron in my water, so it's like orange in the back. You know, just keeping it real. Just keeping it real.
Everybody, can I have your attention? Actually, hi everybody. We're gonna do, thanks so much for coming out tonight. We're gonna do a Q&A session. If you have a question for Charlie, feel free to raise your hand and ask. And thanks again for coming out. And we'll let you take the floor.
Well, thanks all. Maybe first I want to really say thank you to Carrie, not just for today. I mean, I could show you my schedule, and we got to meet every single member of the department here, or the department heads, a lot of the additional staff, and at every 2 minutes beforehand, Carrie was knocking on, making sure we got through that. It was, I know, an enormous logistical hurdle, but not just today's help, but even just like through the interview process when I put in my application and got an immediate response saying thank you, this is received. We'll be in touch. She's been prompt with everything. Everything's been very clear. I think a lot of organizations and places I've worked in and places it isn't necessarily that. Especially when those types of pieces I think are working well. It's a tribute to the organization that you've done here, and really, really happy for it. And gives me a lot. And then even with this, the thoughtfulness. The way you took input from staff on the questions for myself, even in the first round, and having this kind of event to really, because it's a new work family. It's especially in a job like this, and pretty much every job we ever have, you kind of you're not just meeting some new person who's joining. It's it's a new part of the family, and it's going to be a significant, if we were to move forward, a significant portion of my life that we'd be hanging out together, a significant portion of your lives that you'd be hanging out together, and it's felt a little like speed dating today, but I've learned so much from this team, and really, really thankful to Carrie and Sue and everybody that I've been meeting today. So thank you so much. Happy to maybe I'll give a little background on myself for those, some will be hearing a spiel again, but and then I believe there's some people online, but I give you a little extended bio. I grew up in Southern California, in a place very different than this, in Mission Viejo, sort of the concrete jungle where, so said there was, kind of track housing where you could touch either neighbor's house from one window from one side to the other, but I had no idea who any of my neighbors were through my entire childhood, even though you're so close to them. And one of the things that I've loved about Maine since moving here in 2020, although I've been coming to Maine since I was a little kid, is just that sense of place in your community and waving to everybody. In the wintertime, I have a chance that I actually know them. In the summertime, I'm just waving randomly at people, I think. But it's one of the things I really love about this place. And so grew up in Southern California, went to UC Berkeley for undergrad where I majored in rhetoric, which is a real major if you can believe. They still have it, teachers and everything. And kind of just got my start in sort of the campaign politics side of things. I finished my last semester of college writing a thesis on senatorial war rhetoric concerning the Iraq war resolutions. And I think as I mentioned to Casey, one of the city councilors on our first interview, and Carrie, you were there too, I think my younger career, like a lot of younger folks, I kind of had this, younger, I wanted to be where all the action was, in DC and the heart of things and politics, and I had a lot of great experiences, worked on, managed U.S. Senate and governor's races around the country, ballot initiatives. I handled operations and logistics on more than a few presidential campaigns, but it wasn't until 2017 that I kind of felt like I found my calling. I was asked by Governor Baker, whose campaign I'd previously worked on, to join the Baker administration and handle communications and customer outreach for the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, which is sort of the executive leadership team, an umbrella organization for about 2,000 employees in Massachusetts state government, handling the Department of Labor Relations, unemployment assistance, all of our career centers, industrial accidents, which is kind of the workers' compensation system. We instituted while we were there the paid family medical leave program, and then the big one, which is the Department of Unemployment Assistance. I started off managing, big communications department, and really kind of, I think Governor Baker, he's a very programmatic, and his team on sort of, there's always things that need to be fixed in government, and finding the places that needed fixing the most, and really focusing good people and taking an iterative, collaborative approach to fixing that problem until it's fixed. And sometimes it gets broken again, and you have to refix it. And I learned so much from what he did, and there's teams did with the RMV, with what a lot of our teams did with consolidating and rebranding our career centers and improving constituent services, and implementing paid family medical leave, and really sort of finding a passion for helping people in government. And that really got hit home, I think, like a lot of people in this room who've worked in government during the pandemic, when I think a lot of us kind of found out how much we really relied on government. And I know for me, it was kind of a big transition in my life too. I kind of went from, managing this communications piece and kind of having a set schedule and a set kind of meetings for what we're going to be doing to like, I work in unemployment assistance. I am a member of that team, and we would need to do whatever we can because we had 50,000 people on unemployment over a year typically. And with 50 people in a in-person call center, and within a month we went to 1 million people on unemployment. And that 50-person in-person call center was wildly dangerous for the people that were there. And I was unfortunate and fortunate enough to help build the team that really redesigned our workforce systems to kind of meet what I call that avalanche of need. And I'm happy to go into a lot more detail on that process. But really felt like I found my calling in redesigning government services to meet those kind of needs. And I went from that piece to kind of my next one, which was what was then the Labor Market Information Division, which was a division in crisis. They do our unemployment statistics, our job statistics, workforce forecasting, a lot of custom research for the governor and secretary's office. And they really weren't being able, and a lot of fiduciary responsibilities for the unemployment trust fund. And they weren't really meeting needs, and I was sent in to kind of turn around that department and figure out a way for it to meet, have its resources meet it, or have its capacity meet its resources. And it was it had 75 to 14 people in the department. It was deobligating federal funds at a pretty significant level. And unlike the unemployment kind of piece, there wasn't a crisis to kind of move government, which can really move government in those kind of times. It was a much more measured approach that had to be taken to kind of rebuild this organization. I'm really happy that looking back on this experience, we're now back to over 25 staff now. We stabilized our federal funding. We've hired a new director, a new deputy director, a new chief economist, entirely new research team, reclassified a lot of people in union positions that really hadn't kind of had we're dealing with a lot of additional jobs and duties that they didn't sign up for when they originally started, and that was kind of a big part of their pressure points. I think I originally was planning on sort of departing and going to grad school, which I ended up doing, but my organization wanted to keep me around part-time. So I took a year off in the 2022 timeframe, 2022, 2023, to get a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, while working part-time, still with my organization to sort of see a lot of the staffing changes through, promised them 6 months after I graduated that I'd kind of see through that transition. And then October came, and I saw this job posting, and that was kind of one of the things, I really wanted to make sure I stayed in Maine my next job and was able to keep contributing to government. Over half the Kennedy School grads actually go to private sector, it may surprise you. But I really, when I saw this posting, I said this is a way for me to really marry a lot of my academic experience, my government experience, and even I think a lot of my political experience, and contribute to my community and get to know my community in a new way, and learn new things. I've learned new things on a lot of things that are very similar to my state government experience and a lot of my academic training here in Ellsworth and municipal government. I've learned a lot, especially these two here, on some of the differences and the challenges and the opportunity that Ellsworth faces, and I'm just really excited about the opportunity to be a member of this team. So. And with that, I'll happy to open it up to some questions. Sure. Yeah.
At one point, you said something about you went from 50 people on unemployment to
50,000.
50,000. But then I heard the word dangerous in there. Could you explain? Did I hear that correctly?
Dangerous.
Were you talking?
Oh yeah.
About
For the so there's 50 people in a call center. Originally 50,000 people on unemployment, with 50 people in a call center,
okay,
servicing those 50,000 people over a year.
Oh, okay. So
Not all 50,000 needed the call center. Oftentimes, you can apply for unemployment assistance and get right to the end without any issues, and you get your checks, and they do the checks. But for a subset, a fairly large one, they have issues that they need to go through tiers of agents, and we had about 50 people.
So the danger was Karen's.
The danger was COVID and being in a room like this, talking on a cell phone
That's
in a call center.
Sure.
So and that's in some ways that's a big. So we were working for those first 3 months in office, trying to figure out a way to make everybody remote, because we knew twofold. We knew we needed, I guess threefold. We knew we needed to scale the organization. We also knew we needed to make it all remote. We couldn't have just managers and supervisors in a room training people in person. Oddly enough, a lot of the vendors and contractors we use to scale our customer services are Maine-based. There's a pretty large customer service call center apparatus here in the state of Maine, which I didn't know before that. So, yeah, it was about scaling the system, scaling it remotely, and then and the other piece was, what do you do, like, in the meantime? I think one of the immediate things that was pressuring me from day one was, like, we're not going to be able to meet this for a while. We ended up having to get about 2,000 people hired to service that need, and then we didn't quite know it was going to be that big at the time, but we knew that there was going to be a period of time when we weren't able to meet expectations of government, because it was true that our legacy systems were difficult and were not meant to handle that many problems. It was true that 50 people in this call center, they can't just immediately expand. If we had 2,000 people on staff all the time, you'd say we're wasting money just waiting for these types of things. But that's, especially in a mission-driven organization, we're not going to make excuses like that. And I mentioned it in the city council meeting when they asked about my kind of approach to communications. And it's both in crisis communications, because I had to deal with the press a lot, but also on an individual level. So you can bore people, but you can't ignore them. They want to know that somebody's there. One of the other innovations that I made in that time, I actually took it from my campaign days, was I instituted a teletown hall system within the first week of the pandemic. I knew that people needed information. We could put it on the web, we could try and do some interviews, but they needed really almost like training information on how to apply for unemployment assistance. So I recruited our best customer service agent, Hal, who, if you Google Boston Globe, Hal unemployment assistance, you'll see a picture of him and his cat. Don't be fooled, he's the smartest, most interesting, best government employee I think I've ever come across. He could take the most mad person who had the worst customer experience in unemployment and make them, crying with thanks by the end of his call. We were able to host, sometimes we'd host up to a couple 100,000 people. We hosted them every single day. Found a vendor very quickly to implement the system. that could host this sort of town hall, that people could ask their questions, they could vote on what their biggest issues were, so we could actually like figure out, oh, passwords was 20% of our problem. We didn't have double authentication with passwords, so we had, you know, hundreds of thousands of people that were just, you know, in a backlog. So, okay, tell our IT partner, our systems, we got to figure out a new way to do this. And then a lot of it, you just kind of, you know, efficiencies at scale when, you know, when we just sit there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, taking question after question with Hal, taking people through password problems and what qualifications, how they fill out the forms, because a lot of, you know, especially at that scale of need, a lot of these people had never done that before. I learned an incredible amount about the unemployment system and we hosted that every single day, even with the secretary and Secretary Acosta. Was amazing to do that kind of thing. For I think 3 months was an every day. We actually ended up making them in Spanish and in Portuguese. There's a large Portuguese community there in Massachusetts. And I was always surprised. You'd think this is going to be like a disaster every day, like somebody's just going to start screaming at me as secretary. But people were just so you can bore them, but you can't ignore them. Like they were just, and people they'd be like, I've been on the phone waiting for 2.5 months to get this call, to finally speak to Hal, and oh my God, Hal, like I can't believe I'm finally going to talk to you, because we didn't have like as many tier 1 agents of Hal's level, and they, instead of just being like, how dare you guys, it's taken too long, they're like, thank you for, like, I knew that, like, I was upset I couldn't get my benefits, I couldn't get my payments, but, like, I knew that the secretary was on, and you and Hal were going to be on, you're going to talk to people, and I might get on, and the situation might get solved. It was a wild time, and there was that, and just every single day, just with our mission-driven DUA, and, at that point in time, kind of like, regardless of labor standards at career centers in the executive office, like you were an unemployment person, and it was a really unique experience. Also, because we made all these systems remote, it gave me the ability to work in Maine, which is how I got up here. I think we originally came in the summertime to kind of visit my wife's grandfather, who had bought a house in Castine in the early '90s, and just to kind of escape Massachusetts. But we were both working remotely, and we saw this little school, and Castine has a little elementary school, K through 8th grade, and as somebody who's a registered Maine guide and has been spending my whole life just trying to get up to Maine as much as possible, it was like, okay, we're working remotely. My wife got permission to work remotely. It was a real opportunity as well, and I really enjoyed the ability to be up here, and it's kind of why I'm excited to take this next step to come back to the in-person work. I have loved the remote work. I love the scale and the opportunities it gives, but especially after being back in grad school for a year and in person back when I was in Boston, I was going into the office a lot. I also like that human interaction, especially a lot of the conversations we've had today. You need that, the signals and that kind of to kind of tell where somebody's at. That's super important. And talking to the counselors last night about like some of the importance of accessibility to the city manager, not just from as we talked about, like an office hours, or just holding something, but like seeing them in the Flexit, seeing them around town, that kind of getting to being able to email and having that kind of personal connection to your government, I think is a really interesting opportunity, and really excited about that next prospect. So,
what do you see as our city's sort of most exciting opportunities, or perhaps even, some things that maybe you've observed since October, because I'm assuming that you started really paying attention in October when you...
I did. I read the business attraction plan. I love the kind of matrix of interesting and cool opportunities here, whether it's a new hotel, the food space they were talking about. And I think I was talking to Patrick. I don't know if he's here anymore, but he asked me kind of a similar question about like what my vision was for Ellsworth, and I told him, I was like, I need to do a lot more diagnostic work with this group. I was like, but I'm kind of like keep Ellsworth cool, or like make Ellsworth even cooler. Like there's just so much cool stuff going on here that I feel like I'm always finding out about, and this city just seems to be like, growing in that way. That's like, no offense to Bar Harbor if anybody's on here, but like, we have people visit us in Castine. We tell them to like if you have to go to Acadia in the summer, you must find. I advise going to Schoodic and hiking that, but don't go to Bar Harbor. Like stop in Ellsworth. And you know,
I live there.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just teasing. I do live there, but I am with you.
She'd be the first one to tell people.
Yeah, it's
That's a -4.
so it feels like an enormous opportunity, but also a challenge. How do you kind of keep this place cool and interesting and not necessarily become Bar Harbor, which is obviously this amount of growth. When it's spillover, that place seems to be maxed out. So it's an opportunity and an advantage. To me, it seems like. And it's funny because my perspective versus I was talking to some of people who've been around here a lot longer, and they were actually saying that pre-COVID there was more nightlife opportunities in Ellsworth than they feel like there are now. Like there were places that were open at 11, 12 o'clock, and there's not really that. Which to me was surprising because to me Ellsworth seems like, compared to Castine, a lot of nightlife. Like this is where the action is. So yeah, I kind of see like that Ellsworth is on the kind of, is on this sort of interesting track. That's a real unique opportunity, and I think actually it was, you asked me, like, what's your kind of 3 years? I mentioned, I really feel like it's only 2 years if you're really doing well as a leader to help kind of build capacity within an organization to sort of mobilize the system to kind of confront some of its biggest challenges. It still takes about 2 years, unless there's some crisis and you're given absurd resources, to really start seeing the fruits of your work. I think leadership a lot of times is about, pushing change at a pace that, people can tolerate. If you push too fast, you're going to burn, if you come in here saying, I'm going to just this, that, and the other thing, I'm going to increase, I'm going to need a lot of money, or I'll do it with no money, and I can do that. You kind of promise way too much, you underdeliver. It takes that much time. And, in 3 years, which is, I think, what the contracts usually are, we'll probably have just started getting into that, all right, if we can really build something, that kind of culture that's really, an adaptive organization that can really take a lot of like new and changing environments and deliver on them quickly, and kind of just starting to get that. But 5 years is, I can see like, Ellsworth really starting to take off, whether it's me or somebody else here. I mean, I really just speaking in general, it seems like there's a lot going on here. But also like, if things are, like, I also feel like this is a kind of like a life's work kind of situation. Like there's so much interesting stuff going on in Ellsworth. You look at the history of this place, Castine, Maine used to be the county seat. And through some technological changes, when the railroad started coming through here, and Castine's sort of claim to fame was it didn't have a frozen port in the wintertime. So if you were in Maine and you wanted to get your goods out, and you needed a big ship for it, you had to send them through Castine. And there was a movie theater there, there was a hospital there, there was a high school, and Ellsworth kind of established that. They took that Castine. It's still a lovely place to live. And then the people, the decisions that went to that High Street corridor that, were probably government decisions in a large part with the business community and others, and like some really forward-thinking pieces that have like made this town, have an enormous, not just to Ellsworth, but as we talked about yesterday, I was really interested in the way a lot of the counselors were talking about Ellsworth, not just as like what's good for Ellsworth, but how this place thinks of itself as like what's good for this entire region. And I feel like you don't hear that too much, and like Ellsworth kind of like as goes Ellsworth, like so goes down east in some ways. So in some ways, like this isn't just a project for people here, but for the people all around in these communities. So I see a lot of like really cool, more interesting things like that. A lot of great planning, a lot of good organizations. There was the person I just talked to from the Woodlawn. The amazing stuff they're doing there, and that kind of new barn that's coming up, and the beautiful library you all have. And I just heard about this, the candles pin bowling, which I know isn't a new thing, but I didn't know about it until recently. I'm excited to take my kids there. I just heard about this this indoor batting cage. Oh my gosh, super excited to take I feel like, if there's anything, even if we don't move forward with me as the candidate here, I will know this area a lot better and be able to, utilize it more. And I really feel like there's an amazing amount of cool stuff going on here, and want to be a part of it if I can. Yep.
So I appreciate all the things you've said about your previous employment, your current employment. I'm just trying to figure out how you would translate that background into this new job when we look at very specific issues here in Ellsworth, like our decaying infrastructure.
Yeah.
And how, where it's clear that sometime over the next 2 or 3 years, we're gonna be looking at some heavy-duty construction projects as we start replacing things from Water Street up the hill. And I'm wondering how you plan on keeping a bond rating and how you plan on basically structuring all of this, where on top of it, 4 to 5 million people drive through here over a 6-month period of time.
Yeah, it's kind of the question, I think, or at least a lot of what I've been with my research for Ellsworth and my conversations today is a lot of big opportunities, a lot of big challenges with all those people coming through, with the aging infrastructure, with the fact that Ellsworth, doesn't quite qualify for that low to moderate income grants and sort of things that could, infuse even more money into some of those areas. The finance piece, which I read about in the news, sort of like the latest of the audit, some of the hiring issues. I think that's kind of where I can come in on a couple-fold. One is, in hiring and in helping with staff turnover, helping with staff morale. It's something I've done a lot in my all the organizations I've been with. It's usually a pretty key piece. And I know the finance department is working hard to do that. The other piece is kind of in the bonding capacity and kind of where you're at is, I really feel like with most organizations, you can have big strategic plans, you can have, I do a lot of strategic planning, but a lot of ways all strategy is about resource deployment, and your financial resources, are some of the biggest besides your time and your personnel. And I don't have a good view into that quite yet. I need to, I've read the previous audit of the town that was put in, I think, 2 years ago, or it was the last one that was publicly available. A lot about what I said with Governor Baker and kind of his, peace in government. It seems like that's going to be where I need to start first. At least, I like to know an organization a lot better before I really make a prescriptive, like where I need to go or where I need to spend my time. But having talked to a fair amount of people, that the finances, I know tax rates went up last year, how much the bonding capacity, what's the competitive tax rates between Ellsworth and other areas, being able to kind of do that long-term analysis, getting, the full matrix of what's going to be needed, how it's going to be cost, how you space out that cost, with the current resources within the town to get it, what can be done through grant funding, what can be done through the state, what's going to have to be done locally. Because it's a big piece, and it's not the exciting, giant new building kind of piece. It's really replacing things that it's politically difficult sometimes. You're gonna have to do a tax rate increase, or you're gonna have to consider bonding, which is essentially a tax on your future citizens in the area, and having some tough conversations. I also think it's an opportunity to kind of, especially with the new leader, to kind of come in, do that sort of analysis. And be really transparent about how we get there. I do have some bonding experience with the Unemployment Trust Fund. We went. It's still to be determined. We bonded for about $2.5 billion to replace the amount we went negative during the pandemic. Now that was when bonding capacity was at 0.5% or 1.2% at that time. Now, municipal bonds, I think it's about 5%, is what you're looking at. It's hopefully going to go down soon, but also, how you can kind of really focus on that as an organization so that you have a strategic, financing plan, and you can be very transparent with the town about where it's at, about the pressures that we're going to be under, about the counter pressures, not just from the infrastructure stuff you talked about, but the school, the technical school that's here, the everything that's in the economic development plan, redevelopment of the waterfront, really getting a comprehensive view of kind of what your priorities are, and how you're going to get to them. I think, I've told a few people today especially in the finance piece, you can tell what a place's priorities are by looking at what it spends money on. and that's true personally. I could ask you what your values are, and then I could ask to see your credit card, and I could tell you actually how much your values and match what you say to what you actually spend money on. I think the same is true with organizations. I've built lots of budgets on campaigns, very, from scratch. The budgeting process in state government is different. We have a very large finance organizations, but I should also say it's very laborious. And they're facing a lot of the same pressures that Ellsworth is playing. Lack of staff in financing departments. It's a very technical skill set. It's very time consuming. It's not the most politically exciting or interesting. So it's not areas to be in, but it's absolutely critical. Oftentimes reconciliations, I'll never forget. I'm not going to say too much. I was going to give a little more. Some of the budgeting that I've seen in state government and going through line by line. We're in an economic research department with fiduciary responsibilities for projecting for the unemployment trust fund and other things. And sometimes it's meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, especially if your finance systems aren't quite lining up. If you're developing new systems, if they're especially in like the auditing procedures, sometimes they can deliver these reports that are pretty complicated, but you need to get them back into lay terms too, so you can tell the story of like what's happening, where we are financially, just like you would do in a house budget, and where you want to be, what your values are to spend money on, and having some tough conversations on what you're going to prioritize, and oftentimes what you're not going to prioritize. It's very difficult. Wish I could say that it's just going to be, Charlie Pierce is going to come in here, Moneybags Pierce, and I'll find all the grant funding to make it work out. But this is a citizen-led, part of the budgeting process and the financing process, and you all are going to have play a big role. And I think as city manager, working closely with the finance department, really getting a handle on that and being able to tell a story of where we're at in terms of our finances now, and how that matches our goals and dreams for this community in terms of our financial resources is sort of mission critical for this role. I wish I could tell you I have a 12-point plan for how to solve your financial problems here and reach that, but that would be a lie. It's going to take an enormous amount of effort, iterative work, that same bit by bit by bit, pacing the work, understanding where we're at, trying to think of creative solutions in order to get there, whether that's revenue increases through programmatic revenue, whether it's grant increases, and whether it's bonding capacity, should the city council choose, whether it's tax increases. We've seen that before, whether the town can handle those types of things, and being very honest and transparent about that. So, does that answer your question? Or?
Sort of, kind of. I mean, I'm just concerned because this community, I've lived here most of my life, and this community has historically seen itself as a year-round economy. And it's no longer a year-round economy. There is an economy that operates year-round, but it doesn't mean that it sustains itself for the other 6 months of the year. So we really count on tourism, and we count on all the locals having money in their pocket from tourism, but we also need to understand and know that going into the future, if we're looking at all these infrastructure changes that absolutely need to be done, nobody in this room would disagree with that. We need to know what the plan is going to be, because it's going to impact everybody in this town for a few years. And I lived here back in the 70s when we had to redo all the mains and storm and all this stuff through this town back then, put in the sewer treatment plant. And it was incredibly disruptive, and we only had 1.5 million people who visited the area in the summer. And we didn't have 9,000 people who lived in town, and another 23,000 who lived, between MDI, down east a little bit, and Blue Hill.
Right.
So it's a concern that I have. I have a business. I have a couple of them. I actually have one out of town and one in town. But these are things that really can make or break all these businesses around here and people's personal lifestyle choices in terms of moving around. And, you know, with a big undertaking that needs to be done.
So you feel that there's growth in the town, there's enormous tourist and sort of pressures on the systems that are here, and there's a big fear that the kind of financing from the resources the town's gonna be forced to provide on these infrastructures will essentially
Not
price.
necessarily, I just wanna have confidence that we look at keep maintaining a strong bond rating,
Yep.
and that we just don't, you know, that we have to be really smart. But I also think we need to be really looking at what this town is now, and it's not what it was 15 years ago. I mean, a lot of the housing here is Airbnb, and a lot of buildings have been improved because of it, but it puts a different load on the town, not in necessarily a bad or good way, it's just a reality. But we are the town that everybody has to drive through to go in any direction
Right.
in this part of Maine. And so it has we've developed a serious traffic problem. Part of that rests on state because we have Route 1, Route 3, Route 1A, those are all state roads. I know we're an urban compact, so we have that to deal with. So I'm just hoping for the benefit of the entire area that as we move forward with the things that need to be done, just practical measures, not even talking about ideas and, you know, the cool stuff, like how are we gonna make this work? And everybody kind of keep a smile on their face.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's real. So, and we all know, like, you know, anytime there's road work done on any road, like look what Blue Hill dealt with the last year or two, you know, that was kind of.
Or Searsport, I don't know if you've driven through
Yes,
there, like
Searsport, I
6
mean,
month period of
these are-
time, it's
these are
just
all-
like.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But in Searsport, they wanted that.
Yeah.
And Wiscasset, they wanted that. So you have to pay a price for improvements, and the only time we can do them is 6 months of the year, we can't be doing them now.
Yeah, and it's something you have to, I know, and I was reading recently about Brunswick, I think they're trying to redo all their sidewalks, and they put it out, and first they didn't get any bids, because it's not even just.
No, right.
The planning ahead, you just.
That's right.
You know, I actually do a lot of economic research, and it's just reading in our piece on construction productivity, like almost every industry has gained an incredible amount in productivity, except for construction. Since like the 1970s, construction has not gained productivity at all. And you see that, it's a lot of the expenses, and it's, gosh, if you're able to do a project pre-2020, like that project is now like 40–50% higher than it was back then, if you can even find the people to do the work. You know, and I think they had to put it back out at a much higher price to even get people to do sidewalks. It's important and needs to be addressed pretty quickly. So.
But I guess the final thing I really have to say, and that it's great to have an opportunity to speak to you about it, but this is a city that, as we all know, has at times reached its potential, at times has, and this is in the course of my lifetime here, so at times it's reached its potential, at other times has not lived up to its potential. I think right now we have a great opportunity here, but we don't really have a lot of room to make mistakes anymore. And the thing is, when we look around, I call them the 3 Bs. So Bangor, Belfast, Bucksport, Bar Harbor, it's actually 4 of them. And when we look at those communities, because we all like to compare, we all like to look, and oh, look what Bangor did, or Belfast, or Bucksport. And Ellsworth is sort of sitting in the middle of somewhat of a train wreck, only because of the evolution of things. It's not a fault, it's not like industry left and we're left holding the bag. It's just been the era that we're in now. COVID, you know, that certainly was a contributing factor. And I just want to make sure that whatever we do going forward, that you, if this is going to be you, come in with a clear understanding of what you're really going to be faced with. you're a nice guy, that's great. No, really, I mean, you know, it's just, you know, that whole thing's great, but to have, I really think it behooves you to have a very, very, you know, intense relationship with yourself, like, can I really take this on? Because we're gonna be counting on you.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned last night with the council, I think thank you for saying I'm a nice guy. I think a lot of people have mentioned my positives column, that I bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm to the roles and sort of that I'm in. I try and really try and inject that and kind of make that infectious with the groups, that like we can kind of work and let's keep this positive, and sometimes not always. But there's also a darker side of that, which is I'm also relentless and methodical, I attack problems until they're finished, especially, and you know, to me it's best in class. When I go into something, I want to be able to leave it knowing that, and also I've learned a lot from myself that there's dangers in that piece too, in that side of things, because you can also oftentimes feel like you have certitude, and the way of doing things that needs to happen that really actually require a little bit more input from others, and I've done a lot of self-work on that piece and to be able to understand other people's perspectives. Well, I admit I hate to harp too long on this, but I am curious as to when you said things like there's been times in Ellsworth when they're going well, and there's also been times when they're not. Can you just give me a little bit on like what the well looked like? If I'm looking for like success for me, and like what that looks like from a citizen and how you kind of saw it. Maybe it could be programmatic or.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the way we look at things today, I'm 70 years old, okay? So the way I look at things today is not the same way I would look at, I saw things many years ago. And Americans' lives have changed, and we're an excellent example of that. But when I first came here in the early 70s, we had a real downtown. We had a grocery store, a drugstore, a hardware store, a men's clothing store, a women's clothing store, a jewelry store, this store, that store, right? So that was downtown America. And none of this, anything around the town was not developed yet. There was still woods and fields. And like, I don't know, probably sometime in the 80s, things started to change, you know, the big box mentality. Walmart first came here, where Martin's is now, and that was really the first big kind of kahuna that came to town before we developed the Acadia Highway. And that was considered at the time, just because this is the way how development goes, a really good thing for the town. And it was in many ways, because it brought goods that we couldn't get anymore because the downtown had now started to die.
Yeah.
Okay, the original business owners had retired. You know, their children didn't want to run businesses. Things were different, not in a bad or good way, it just was a reality. So then, we have kind of into the 90s and into the 2000s, and there was a real, like, kind of come to Jesus moment for Ellsworth, because we had to really figure out who we were, and we couldn't tell our own story. Because now we were being surrounded by development on the outskirts of the area. So the Super Walmart came in, and we actually had a Lowe's here. I mean, we had a Lowe's, a Home Depot, a Super Walmart. Lowe's eventually left, but then that left a giant piece of taxable property sitting there for several years before the Jackson Lab came in. I mean, it was quite a number of years. And then with the lab coming to Ellsworth, that was a boom in many people's minds, but it didn't really boom the way that people thought it was going to boom. And then in the meantime, the downtown's trying to reorganize itself. Myself with a business partner, we happened to have bought the old Masonic Hall building downtown. Totally redid that and created, like we ended up with 12 to 14 tenants in there, people paying us rent, and had a cafe and all that stuff. And that was okay, and then we had the recession. And that took Ellsworth a good 3 or 4 years to really be able to stand firm again and go, whoa. Well, by then, Amazon, Facebook, internet was a real thing. I mean, it just, the lifestyle, everything started changing.
Yeah.
And so now, here we are, and we're a united community in terms of knowing we need to create a new story for ourselves. It's been great this year that there's been the work on the comprehensive plan, because we were 10 years overdue, and you're supposed to do them every 10 years. So it's given everybody, and everybody here, I'm sure people listening, I mean, a lot of people really have put in a lot of time or a little bit of time, but had some input. And that's been really, really positive for us as a community, to start having some pretty honest dialogues, you know? And like right now, I mean, housing, it's like, I live in a nice house, but my house is now worth 3 times more than what I paid for it. Good for me, but I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, not.
Right, I'm fine in my house.
Yeah, if
I'm
you're
an
selling
old
your
lady
house,
who
it's good
lives
for
in a
you,
nice
but-
big old house, right? But it's just like we're on this cusp right now, and I think whoever we bring in and how we manage ourselves, and manage ourselves with the Chamber of Commerce, the Heart of Ellsworth, the Economic Development Faction, you know, all these organizations, we need a united front here. And because all of us have been kind of working these little silos, trying to survive and figure this out, we need to kind of step out of the silos, and we need to pull this together and start having some really honest conversations about who we are and what we want, and dealing with the big thing, which is millions and millions of people who drive through our town. And I mean, in many ways, it's a great thing. If we could get a buck out of everybody's wallet, right?
You know,
I mean, that'd be a lot of money flowing through town.
And you know, there's-
We can't.
You know,
Could you set up a toll booth?
Yeah.
That's the answer.
you know,
But locals don't
Yeah,
have
we
to
need to
pay.
slow,
It's
slow the
just-
traffic down.
we can kind of reroute some roads.
We'll just put up
The,
parking
um,
meters, but not really give tickets for them.
I love two things about what you said there on like the story. First is that one of the things I've heard a lot, I think you mentioned it, is the on the cusp. But then also like the story, like we need to tell, like we're on the cusp, and like what is the story that we're telling after that? Like, you know, what is the vision? Like, and I've read some of the documents here. I'm excited to read the comprehensive planning stuff when it comes out. And then in some ways the real work begins. Once we set our priorities, and like we talked about this as a council last night, you know, setting out kind of our success metrics for 2024, and what we think we can get done in 2024, and holding some accountability to myself and to our organization for what's feasible, and then also like what can't we do under our current capacity that in 2024 what we want to do, that we have to do in order to kind of meet that for 2025. And then, even though it's a difficult story, the story to tell about finances, and it's the story to tell about that infrastructure project, and the story to tell about how we're going to tackle these things so that we can have some faith in kind of what that over the cusp looks like over the next 5-10 years in Ellsworth. Yep.
Leslie, what you described is pretty much every downtown in America. Maybe it was Walmart here, but where I lived in New Jersey, it was a mall. It killed all the downtowns. Everyone shopped at the mall. And the internet is happening everywhere. Amazon is happening everywhere. I see Ellsworth, when I think of when I had moved here originally, and I would say to people, I'm moving to Ellsworth, they would say, why? And then recently, I mean, I moved recently, but when I would tell people I lived in Ellsworth, they'd be like, oh, that's amazing. You know, like Ellsworth is amazing. In the 20 years that I've lived in, or 18 years that I've lived in Maine, I think the downtown Ellsworth has never looked as good.
Yeah.
It's filled with stores. There's no real empty place. I mean, when I think of different times when there was nothing downtown, there were just big empty stores.
2014, 15, like that?
Yeah, it's changed drastically.
Kind of post-recession.
And I'll tell you something, the cool element is important here. I think it's attracting younger people, which I think is major. is one of the things that, having lived here, seeing young people have places to go and, you know, go to Fogtown, go, you know, whatever. And there's more coming, including what you're doing, Leslie. So I think that if anything, I'm not saying that an infrastructure is an American issue. The whole country is having infrastructure issues. But I think if anything, there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. And I just don't want Leslie to paint a real negative picture about Ellsworth. I think Ellsworth is getting as much press as Belfast, which is a terrific town, you know, and they've done, and there's some advantages that we don't have here. Belfast has a wonderful waterfront. We do too, but we have to develop that. That's one of the major problems with Ellsworth. You know, there are, but there's, again, there's interest in that. There's trails going up again on the water. There's all kinds of things that are happening here. So there's a lot of positive energy in Ellsworth right now, more than I've ever seen in the time that I've lived in Maine.
Yeah. I didn't know
And I
this.
just want to clarify something. I invest in downtown Ellsworth. I have a business, I have employees, I'm moving my business. I'm a huge, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe in Ellsworth.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be misconstrued for what I said. I was just thinking more in the bigger way, that because there's a lot more going on here, kind of under the radar than we see face value. For instance, a huge amount of people that live in Ellsworth don't work here, and vice versa. That's huge.
You asked earlier what it's looked like when Ellsworth is having a good moment, kind of what, you know, how to describe success here as we've seen it. And I've been here for 20 years, and in that time, I think for much of it, it felt like there was a disconnect between what was going on in city government and city administration and what was going on, you know, amongst the businesses and citizens and kind of families and things that were living in town. And I think one of the things that I've seen change most notably in the last 5 so years and kind of ongoing, it really feels like it's continuing to build momentum, is more of a pulling together of all those varied businesses and nonprofits and, you know, the council and citizens and folks who are interested in the schools and, you know, and real estate developers and housing developers and things like that. There seems to be more interaction and more coming together to talk about how to address these challenges that certainly exist and that everyone's describing well. I think one of the key bits and what makes a job like the one that you're considering complicated and what makes it successful when it's well done is the ability to draw on and consider all of those masters that, you know, a city manager serves, which is complicated, right? You've got your elected officials, you've got all the constituents, and you've got your staff. And so to be able to juggle that well and find partnerships with nonprofits, you know, like the Land Trust that has been involved in some projects with the city recently,
Yeah.
You know, with the downtown organizations and the chamber and things like that. Those are the times that I've seen things go really well, when things are not closed off and this is kind of the secret room where stuff happens, but instead that, you know, it's really been a welcoming and collaborative space.
Yeah, it's a lot of my academic training was in this kind of leadership fallacy, which, you know, I don't which is, you know, charismatic dominance, and that somebody can come in here and tell you, like, you know, that they're going to solve everything as the authority in an organization. If you're an authoritarian and very well resourced organization, maybe a leader can really just, you know, but really leadership is about building capacity and mobilizing systems to address community problems in ways that, like you said, we're all kind of rolling together and we're kind of coming together on a common narrative. And that can be really difficult processes. A lot, you know, something, especially like this, where there's so many people that have a stake in making this place a success. How do you mobilize all of those pieces?
And I just want to say, at least from my perspective, that's exactly where we are as a city. We have, and Leslie did say it, and it is truthful, and Nate put a finer point on it, is that you have all of these different groups that are working, perhaps sometimes in a vacuum, people are trying to come together, but we need a leader who's going to really be able to get everybody at the table, respectfully speaking, and everybody really kind of leaving those meetings, understanding where their lanes are, where opportunities cross over, where tasks cross over, and everybody's kind of got to figure out how to work together. And that is, I would say, in my opinion, from my position, and I know you have no idea who I am. My name is Cara Romano. I'm the executive director of the Downtown Organization.
Yep.
And I would say in the past 8 years in my position, that's been my confusion of working for a nonprofit on behalf of a district in the city and trying very much so to work with other nonprofit leaders, also intersecting with municipality, and just wanting a straight answer like, what can we do? What is the process? How do we respectfully hear this on the street? And people are asking us, well, who do I go to in city government to take care of this, that, because they feel comfortable talking to us, but don't necessarily know how to navigate anything from walking through City Hall all the way to, you know, maybe perhaps the website or anything like that. And so it's sort of people perceive it to be our job. And we don't always know the answers. Sometimes we're able to get them, but other times it's just the same, us guessing. And so really being able to tear down those walls and having a good leader who is able to help us get there.
And this is the place for it, whether whether you like it or not in this position, that is an expectation. That expectation may not match the absolute amount of resources or authority this position holds. But it also can be a coordinating mechanism for all these other pieces. And sometimes that's where the work might be, it might be details every day on the finances and getting that figured out and straightened out and getting a story to you on exactly where we're at and how that matches the very technical infrastructure projects and where it's at. But it also might be about doing a lot of those difficult conversations amongst groups and organizations about we've created a plan, how are we going to execute it, who amongst this group is going to take leadership amongst all pieces of the organization to get these pieces over the line, how are we going to hold those pieces accountable and timelines and getting success so we can tell that next part of the narrative. Sorry. Yep.
So I guess similar to that, one of the things that I would really like to see is somebody who is in the city manager role, somebody who is more involved with the different organizations and the committees and the commissions and the people who are volunteering around City Hall and even people who are paid to work around City Hall, I'm sure, but I don't know as much about that. I just volunteer. But to see like that involvement and that input, and because I mean, I guess ultimately in a lot of ways, the decisions that are made and the directions that we choose to go as a commission or as a committee. I'm on the Historic Preservation Commission and the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. So those directions and the choices that we make, while they're part of the overall picture of the city, really the person who, you know, is vested in this a lot of ways is you. And like, you know, might have to go to the city manager and have things signed, whether it's for a grant or for an application to do something or whatever. So to be able to collaborate and really feel like we're on the same page and you know where we're at and what direction we're doing, why we're doing things, I think would be really helpful. So do you have experience working with volunteer organizations or groups like that, or some background?
You know, in a lot of my political experience, that's kind of all you do. Is you have to build enormous volunteer and affiliative organizations at very specific and defined tasks. That's been an important piece. I would also say in terms of government and kind of working across sectors, one of the things I think that was, most interesting to me with Governor Baker is they developed a workforce skills cabinet, which aligned the secretariats of labor and workforce development, economic development, and gosh, I'm having a little labor, workforce development, economic development, housing and urban development, I think as well, and housing to sort of and their finance department, of course, to sort of work together in common issues and share resources. And so that they attack. And then also, there was a lot of coalition building amongst our career technical schools and a lot in our career centers to sort of align our workforce systems that were kind of really siloed off from each other. Because everybody kept saying, I need workers, it's very low unemployment rate, I need in very specific areas. So it took a long time of all of our organizations meeting, constantly to figure out how we could pool our resources to kind of solve some skills gaps problems. And there was a lot of creative thinking, there was a lot of, nobody had the answers at first. And then it kind of came to the fore, well, okay, we've got a lot of aging machinery and just people that are desperate for like upgrades on machinery in these schools so they can get that CNC certification so we can have business partnerships. And so we set up a system where a business, if they had a defined need for a skills gap they have, instead of just complaining about it, they could say, okay, I'll sign up for this program and I'll pay a certain amount and then I'll get students from this program to be trained in this actual category, which actually started to really help with a lot of those advanced manufacturing pieces. And then they kind of, as we were iterating on this, they sort of, okay, we invested $50 million in all of these different like upgrades to these college and high school programs, but like these places, especially in the high schools, are just sitting vacant during the evenings. But they could be training adults. It's not like it matters if it's a kid or it's an adult. So how do we reconvert this? And we need the business community to sponsor this so that it can also start training adults. So that's also a lot of work that I was involved with on that side of things. To be perfectly frank, though, I don't have a lot of experience in the municipal building. I think what needs to be built here at scale. I've built a lot of campaign organizations that rely on a ton of volunteer and coalition building efforts. They're critically important. It takes an incredible amount of work. It can actually be really difficult conversations as well. I think you kind of, there's a theory on building community that in order to build like true community, there's 3 stages. There's pseudo-community, which is kind of what we're in right now, which is we're having a nice conversation with a little bit of back and forth, it kind of recircles out. And then there's chaos, the stage of chaos, when people are really upset with each other. And disagreements are surfaced, hidden agendas are seen, varying points of view. It's a stressful time. And then, but you kind of have to also go through that to get to true community. These are difficult conversations. We've had a little bit of that here on kind of the future of Ellsworth, the vision we're headed, and who's going to get there. And the type of leadership that it takes to do that. I think you're right to take, as you mentioned, to take it really serious. You're a nice guy, but you will not be in the position to be the nice guy all the time. And the kind of where you have to be to kind of build that. It's also, I think, time consuming in a way that may not match the expectations of what's here. We don't oftentimes think of what it's going to take to build that at the front end. Come in here and I want a quick win, and that's probably the quickest way to, small wins, areas where I really feel like, but it's kind of like NASA, not that we're NASA, but NASA didn't just go to the moon in 2 years. They were a coordinating mechanism and they took a lot of time to plan, to figure out things, to iterate, to work with other organizations to really build all those things. It wasn't, NASA really didn't build anything. They coordinated a bunch of different people over a very long period of time and built capacity to do those things. So when the day come, we can beat the Russians to the moon. I also feel like that kind of capacity building, it's one of the reasons I love government work. It kind of gives me a chance to be an entrepreneur. And then I think the best entrepreneurs are the people that kind of fall in love with the problem and really iterate and work, are just excited to solve them. And this is one of those pieces. How do you solve that sort of building all that capacity in this town that's there, that needs direction, that I don't have any formal authority for, even as city manager. Maybe there's even some hard conversations about my lack of authority over those, and I need new leaders in those organizations to take pieces of it for me. Building allies across organizations. Really, really difficult work that takes a long time, and yeah, I don't have rose-colored glasses about what that will mean. It's very difficult things.
sort of building on that, what I was gonna say is, in addition to, you know, talking to people, coming to the tables, going out and finding the people who aren't coming to the table, who also, you know, have good ideas or good energy, or and maybe feel like they're, you know, they're maybe intimidated coming to the table, but really trying to expand that pool of people who can, you know, who care about their city, but maybe aren't as involved in it.
Totally agree. It's thank you so much for coming out tonight. You are an unrepresentative sample, and you're right. I could.
You got a nice selection here.
Yeah.
He's very unrepresentative.
Doing a lot of statistical analysis in our work, you know, I can say that I wouldn't be able to base, you know, and I think we do that a lot of times, right? And that's such a key thing, is to look out for who you're not capturing and who can't be here tonight because they have childcare responsibilities or work responsibilities.
Film festival.
I'm supposed to be somewhere.
Yeah, and like, you know,
It was rude to get out.
no, it's, you know, I think of the problem of homelessness here that's kind of just creeping up. And I was reading something about like San Francisco and homelessness, horrible problem there, right? A lot of smart people, a lot of rich people in San Francisco, they can't solve homelessness. Why can't they? There's been tons of billionaires that have tried. They want to build apps to track, they want to do this, and I think one of the problems they do is they kind of lose that beginner's mind. Like, you know, at some point in time, they were an entrepreneur that fell in love with a wildly complex technological problem that they fixed, and they want to apply that solution to homelessness because they think they have all the answers. But you kind of have to keep that beginner's mind with every one of those pieces, especially when they're adaptive problems that require a lot of learning. So I think that we may have really touched on the adaptive problem here is, you know, there are the technical pieces and the story that we need to tell about the finances and getting certain things in order so that we have, you know, accurate ideas of our bonding capacity and making sure we don't lose our ratings. But how do we do that very adaptive work of bringing this community together and all those resources, you know, in a very sort of flat structure, you know, with not clear lines of authority that have been built elsewhere.
I'm just gonna stand up and try to close this out
Sure.
because you've probably been talking all day long. So unless anyone had another burning question that they were holding on to, maybe we'll
I
pause.
didn't have a question, but I wanted to say something, and that, I think when you talk about what does the good time look like and stuff like that, I for one believe in my adage that things take time. You can't walk into a position and expect that you're gonna know how to answer all those things. If you're willing to listen and if you're willing to work with the people involved, I think that's a major thing. But I've lived in this zip code for 20 years full-time, but I just moved into Ellsworth proper a little more than a year ago. And for me, it would be a wonderful thing to have a voice that comes from here out to not just listen, but to let the community know what is being considered, why it's being considered or not, so that there's a transparency coming back, because somebody, I can't remember who was saying it before, talked about the secrecy of this room. And I think there's a perception of that, which if there was this kind of voice coming back, would help, and you get more support behind the things that are being worked on, and understanding that you can't do everything this year because we don't have the money for it or whatever. Just a thought.
I think it was Michelle Beal that used to do that, right? As city manager, she would like publish a thing in the paper every week or something that was talking, or once a month or whatever, that was talking about what she was doing as city manager for that month, any news or any progress or announcements or whatever.
Right. And there might be another way to do that besides the Ellsworth American.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
I'm just saying, having that voice come back.
I'm just gonna quickly say that one of the most important things that I heard you say was becoming an ally with the organizations. And I think that that has been lacking in Ellsworth. That the organizations tend to compete with each other instead of working together, which came, has come up also. But I think having the city manager being an ally and allowing the organizations to do what they do and to recognize those organizations for what they do well.
We also have a lot of new leadership in those organizations,
Yes.
myself included, from the Chamber of Commerce. But Kara's the old lady on the block, and for a lot, of us, Nick's pretty
Feels
old
like it
too.
too, doesn't it, Cara?
So
I defer to Carl.
Today was another notch on the bed.
truly, Kara's the person. I think we all were like, so if I need to find this out in the city, who do I ask? What's their email? What's their phone number? Are they nice? So
They're always
she's
nice.
our person that we do. So I think to have our new city manager coming in too is such great timing because it lets a lot of the old history go between organizations, the city, the organizations and each other. Like, it's like, okay, let's all work as a team instead of separate, like Leslie was saying earlier, everybody in their own silo, and just, it's like we can all bring our toys to the sandbox and we can all play nice, and nobody needs to take their toys home. We can all play together.
And PJ, you've been very dynamic in the short amount of time that you've been in that job.
And just,
I'll pay you later.
I think it's great to have that too. I mean, there might be these conflicts and these other things, and but it seems like you have a lot of these resources that like a lot of other places would die for. You don't have a lot of that again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, really
sometimes they're
dynamic,
ignored.
powerful
Sometimes
organizations.
ignored.
Sometimes ignored, okay.
And and I think we've felt that get better already. It's not, I
Yeah.
don't think we're at the bottom. I think
Absolutely.
we're
Yeah.
doing this in that
Yeah.
regard as far as collaboration between organizations and involvement with the city. So it's on an upward
But we
trend.
also have one of the strongest councils we've ever had.
Yeah,
This is true.
I don't think
It's
it's
been a
unrelated. No.
a much more progressive council.
And just interested, look at the last few elections, we had so many people run for office, and I think that's been one of the biggest signs that actually people all feel like
And some of the best
things
people
can
have
happen. And to have 9 people running for seats is,
Yeah, it's
when does that happen?
We had one
Yeah.
run for select board.
Yeah, right?
I must say, I come in and pay my sewer and water bill and get licenses here, and the staff is always excellent, friendly, competent, and I think some of the stuff that goes on so well is just taken for granted because it's done so well and done without any fanfare, so I always
And I know,
enjoy
not
coming
to
here.
bring the wrap up, but I kind of started a lot of my conversations with staff today about, I think, any leader coming in, which is like, it's kind of 3 things. It's what are you doing well, and how can I keep it going well? And that seemed to be one of them. I didn't hear anybody talking about, oh gosh, the lines at the front, this, and like that staff back there seems to be really in that kind of iterative mindset before coming in here about how things are set up, and I think a lot of my experience in government, even coming in here, it's like, okay, I can kind of help them on some of the things we've done with our reemployment centers and that front of house, because I think they mentioned front of house there, but a lot of that seems to be, I think there's some stuff in the web that I can help out on that, doing some website redesigns and integrations, that's also very difficult long-term work. But it does seem to be like, that's going great. And like it's interesting to hear from you too, it's funny how you can kind of update your priors, as our economists say. I came in here because when you read and you're trying to do research in the organization, like, wow, there is a wealth of resources from, the Chamber and Heart of Ellsworth and, the business attraction plan and this and that, and you're like, wow, but you can also see the passion of you're here about, like, we need to be getting better, we need to be, like, aligning more, we need to start, we're kind of creating these plans, but there seems to be also nervous, like, how are we gonna get it done? How are we gonna pay for it? Who's gonna be in charge of it? Like, what are the timelines for these things? Which is really big work too, but like one of the cool things about this job, it seems like there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm for it, so.
Yeah, no, it's a great city and a great time for this great city. Thanks, everybody, for coming out.
Here's one of the toys.
I guess eat some food.
Stuff your pockets with